Hello, buddy. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 7.19 PBE server. I keep getting asked about this on stream, these various different changes, because there are a lot of changes going on in this patch. So I'm just going to make what I hope will be a relatively quick video, quicker than some of my other ones that I've done. I'm trying to bring it down a little bit, but it's hard to do that without sacrificing too much depth. So the one thing you need to remember about this, these are not final changes. Okay, I'm not trying to be one of those like, oh my god, OP all caps, like anytime anything shows up on the PBE type of YouTubers, right? So I think people get confused a lot because people ask me on the stream, oh well, what about these buffs to this, or what about those buffs to that? I'm like, they didn't actually happen in the past because they're on the PBE and they didn't make it to the final cut of the patch, right? Because there's been some of these people in the past that have said, oh my god, Zyra's destroyed because they recommended these changes to her plants on the PBE back in March, and they took them away, and they've never been back. And so just keep in mind, these are not actual changes that are 100% going to be in the gameplay, but nevertheless, people do enjoy like exploring some of the ideas and just thinking ahead. Well, what's coming down the line? You know, maybe that influences the type of champions they might buy, or the champions they might start practicing, or whatever. So in the spirit of just inquisitiveness, I'm going to do this, but I just want to make it abundantly clear because I think it's not clear in a lot of these other videos that are out there that talk about changes on the public beta environment, which is what PBE stands for, that these are not guaranteed to be in the final draft. Some version of them will likely be in the final draft, but they are not guaranteed. Okay, so disclaimers out of the way. This is just speculation, just to get people sort of, you know, just to enter the conversation with some of the other all-capsers about some of the changes that are going on here, okay? So, if you're new to my channel, you can always click in the description. You'll find timestamps to different sections if you want to jump around. So if you just want to hear about Ardent Sensor, you just want to hear about Janna, you can jump to those sections. I'm going to cover everything that's on the PBE right now. And then you can access this Google Doc as well in the description. And I'm not going to be doing like super heavy talk about meta shifts because I want to see like the final versions of these before I do. But with some changes, I will talk just very loosely about how I think they'll impact the overall meta. Okay, so Aatrox first up, doesn't matter. Still going to be a relatively weak champion because it doesn't solve his issues. Aatrox's issues primarily stem from his inability to move around in battle with the frequency of other champions that are similar to him but much better. So in other words, he doesn't have enough mobility. He doesn't have enough gap closing. All he has is his little air jump, which is very predictable, relatively easy to dodge for anyone else with mobility. And once he uses that, he has no other way to stick to people unless he buys something like a frozen mallet. So traditionally, these, you know, types of champions have a big problem in higher elos. They can work in lower elos because people just sit there and fight him. But when people just kite him away or crowd control him or whatever, then they have big problems later on. So he's kind of in the Nasus boat where he's super powerful if people just sit there and let him hit him, but they're just not going to do that, right, in higher elos. And Nasus even has a lot more utility than he does. Nasus has far better wave clear. Nasus has a wither, which is like a 5-second massive slow, massive debuff to attack speed. Nasus gets a huge increase in like his overall damage and his tankiness output. He takes towers super quickly. He takes objectives really quickly. So Nasus has just a ton of advantages over Aatrox, and he's the same type of champion, I think, where it's just basically like melee, just utter destruction if you can hold on to people and not let them kite you. And Nasus still barely sees that much play, even though he's super powerful right now, because it's just such a huge liability to be melee without many gap closers. Okay. Azir is another one. So Azir is actually going to be a pretty massive buff. I would not be surprised to see Azir, you know, in the top 5, maybe even the top 3 mid laners after this changes. Because, like, Azir's problem right now, if we go in and look at him real quickly, like, Azir's problem is he's too slow in his development. Because a lot of his damage is predicated not on his items but on his levels, because a lot of his damage comes from these sand soldiers, and so the sand soldiers scale up over time, kind of like Cassiopeia. They scale up over time rather than with your items or the amount of levels that you put into W. So that means that they're trying to position him as a late game champion, but he sacrifices too much early. He just can't really trade back. He doesn't have great crowd control. He doesn't, like, his ranges are okay at the current iteration of him before the PBE, but he just doesn't have enough power. He doesn't have enough burst damage. He doesn't have enough crowd control. He just can't really threaten people that well early on until he gets bullied out. So that's his major problem. But once you get to late game, once you get your, Nashor's Tooth plus Leandri's, I think would be what you'd build on him, or Rylai's. One of the, like, once you get Nashor's, Rylai's, Leandri's, then you're off to the races. But when you're just kind of sitting on Nashor's and you're working on your next piece, you're not going to be as strong as most of the other mid laners who go for Morellonomicon or even Rod of the Ages. So that's kind of where he is right now. He's also extremely hard to play to his optimal level. But what are they changing to him? So how are they helping this? I think it's going to be a big help. So first of all, it's plus 10 movement speed, and this is huge because he has the lowest movement speed in the game possible right now, which is 325. So giving him 335 doesn't sound big, but it really is because it lets him position to be safer, to stay in range of his sand soldiers without overextending and opening himself up to bad trades or jungle ganks. So plus 10 movement speed is actually really huge for him early on. And then they're making a lot of changes to his Q. Let me scroll up here. Making a ton of changes to his Q, so it does a lot more base damage. So now he can actually trade with his Q pretty effectively in lane. I mean, we're talking... it's going from, at level 5, it's going from 145 to 190, and even sort of in the middle here, it's going, level 5 or so. I'm not sure what you'll max. I think you'll probably still max your W, but you might get, like, 2 or 3 points in Q for laning. I'm not an Azir expert, but... that's a significant amount of extra damage, 25 extra damage early on. And it's going to have a lower cooldown so you can spam it more. I don't believe it costs that much mana, right? Azir's never had mana problems, which is nice because he doesn't have to get a lot of mana items. Yeah, it's relatively cheap for a mid laner. So that's good. And they're increasing its hitbox, which when they start giving things more hitboxes, or reducing hitboxes, that's a huge change to balance. So 15 units longer on the hitbox, or 70 longer. I'm not sure exactly what the hitbox is right now. That's some like under the hood type of physics and stats that they don't really divulge that often. But yeah, that seems pretty big. Now the AP ratio is lowered, which is fine. He doesn't get a ton of AP early. And this is really, like I said, just to shore up his early game so that he can actually trade in lane more effectively. And so I'm cool with them taking off the ratio in exchange for higher base numbers. I think that'll help him a lot, especially early on. Now the cast range is also lowered to 870 from 875 to 720, which is okay considering that the soldier command range has also been lowered, which we'll talk about that with the W here in a second. And that's part of their overall balancing scheme where they're trying to make Azir sort of a mid-range, like, machine gun battle mage, kind of like Ryze, right? Because one of the big problems with Azir historically is if he has too much range and he has too much sustained damage, then he can be really oppressive early on, especially because people can't attack the sand soldiers. So it's different from other pets, like Malzahar minions or Zyra plants or whatever, because people can't attack them. So if it has too much range, if those soldiers can go out 800 and stab, for an extra 300 something, that's 1200 range and zoning power, potentially, which is, further than most champions can last hit minions. So that's kind of the balancing problem. So you can't make the soldiers too strong if they are, if they have that much range. So what they've done overall is just lower the range on most of his abilities and give him a lot more power. And that's what they're doing here. So lowering the range, and they're giving him much more kind of burst damage with his Q. So they're lowering the cooldown, increasing the base damage, and increasing the hitbox. So overall, I like that change. I think that's pretty good. So now he can't just like oppressively zone people out. But if he wants to go into kind of mid-range, then he can do some pretty good burst damage now. Now, Arise, there's a lot of changes to this. This is difficult to tell what... Let me see, I could compare these numbers. Now, once again, this is PBE, so it could fluctuate, but... I go from 50 to 195. 60 to 185. Okay, so that's actually really good. Once again, early on, they're giving him 20% more damage with his first point in W. So I think that's actually pretty huge early on. That'll help his early game trade. So they're shaving off like 5 damage at the end of the game. It's fine. You're going to be massacring people. If you get to 6 item Azir, you get to level 18 or whatever. That's fine. So giving him that extra damage early is good. Recharge time lowered quite a bit, especially early on. So once again, you can get more soldiers on the field. You can fight early. They are addressing his core gameplay problems that make him bad. And that's what makes this overall, I think, a very good balancing move. Versus Aatrox, where his core problem is he can't stick to people. Instead of giving him some kind of extra mobility or resets or faster animation on his Q or whatever, just something to alleviate his mobility problems. So that doesn't fix him. But with Azir, this actually is fixing the problem. They know what the problem is. It's his early game trading. It's his early game power levels. And so they're trying to draw that in line. So this is good balancing at work here. Okay, so his cast range is increased to 500, so he can throw the soldiers out a little bit further. That's nice. So now he doesn't always have to have a Q to get him in range. Soldier duration increased. Okay, so they stay out longer, so he can't put them out as far, but they're going to be out there to zone for a little bit longer. The basic attack command. Now, this is one that confused me because I'm not quite sure, because this sounds like this is different from Azir's attack speed, because typically the soldiers attack as fast as Azir does, so whenever Azir attacks, then that works. The soldiers attack too, but this says the cast time reduced from 0.5 to 0.35. On the basic command attack. So I think that's good. I think that means there's less of a delay. So I guess right now there's like a half-second delay when he attacks and when they attack. So they're taking that down to 0.35. I mean, if that's what it actually is, that's a massive buff. Because that's, you know, like 30% or something faster reaction time on the minions. I can't believe there's an extra half-second delay, though. So I'm not sure. I'll leave that to like an Azir expert to sort of figure out what that means. But it sounds good. It sounds, anytime a cast timer is reduced, it seems good. So that could actually be a massive deal. I just don't know exactly how that interacts with attack speed. And sort of what that means overall. But it sounds good. It's going to make for more responsive Sand Soldiers. That's probably a really big buff. I can't quantify it for you. I don't know exactly how that interacts with attack speed. Okay, soldier deactivation range. That means that the soldier doesn't die, I don't believe, when you get out of range, but you can't give them commands anymore. So from 800 to 660. So 660 doesn't seem that far, but you got to keep in mind that the soldier attack range themselves is 375. So that means you get 660 plus 375. So you're still going to have over 1,000 effective range. So as long as you're within 660, then they can stab for that extra amount and give you 1,000 range. That's still quite a long ways to harass. So I think that's okay. Obviously, that's a nerf, but I think it's a good way to balance, once again, with their overall philosophy where they're trying to take Azir. So I think that that's going to be a pretty big deal. Like, all of these changes will be changing his playstyle. But that's kind of the biggest nerf to him is the range. But I think it's worth. I think it's worth for the extra early game power that you have here. They can't attack trinkets or wards. Okay, fair enough. So you can't put it in a bush and clear pink wards with it. Fine. AP on active. I don't even... Is that the AP scaling on them from points? Isn't it already 0.6? It's already 0.6. Was it? Where are they getting this 0.7? Okay, whatever. It looks like it's already 0.6. Maybe it had been Maybe they've been toying with 0.7. I don't know. Whatever. It's already 0.6. That's really high scaling. I mean, you got to keep in mind that there are multiple soldiers that are attacking very quickly late game. So like a 0.6, where that might not be very good on some mages who have like 4-second cooldown on their spell or something. On a sand soldier that's attacking like, 3 or 4 times every couple of seconds, that's a really big ratio. So keep in mind that looks low, but it's actually really high because it scales with attack speed. Then Azir gets an additional amount of attack speed whenever he gets 3 soldiers on the field. So this adds another layer of complexity to Azir because he needs that, right? But I think this will actually be another way to distinguish really good Azirs from average Azirs, is that now you have this like ultra window of power where you get that 3rd soldier down and then you just take off, you know, for the next 4 seconds or whatever before one of them despawns. You just absolutely slaughter everything. So I think that's going to bring out a lot of really cool Azir play, and it also tries to get you to be a bit more aggressive with him because of his E, which we'll talk about in a second, which can spawn a new soldier. So you can use that E to extend the time. You can start the clock with the E if you want, whenever you get to 3 minions, but you can extend the time also. Because if we look to the soldier duration is increased to 10 seconds, recharge time is lowered to 6 seconds. So you should be able, I believe, so you cast one, and then 6 seconds later you cast another one. You'd have to have CDR to get a third one down, I think. Unless I'm missing something here. Like I said, I'm not an Azir Grandmaster. Or you'd have to hit somebody with an E to get a third one down. You have to have quite a bit. You have to have like almost 50% CDR. Because it'd have to be like 3 seconds. So 3, 3, 3. However, this lasts for 5 seconds. So even if the soldier like falls off or dies like almost immediately, then you would still get this buff for 5 seconds with the other 2 soldiers. So yeah, unless I'm missing something, recharge. Oh, you can have 2. It's a stock system. Okay, gotcha. That's how it works. Okay, so you can have 2 stocked up. They recharge after this, and I believe you can hold up to 2, right? Plus Sand Soldier, 2 stored. Okay, so that's how it works. So you have 2 stored. You drop both of them, and then 6 seconds later, you'll have a restock. You drop the third one after 6 seconds, and then boom, that's when you're off to the races. So you need to have 2 already stored up, and then you have this quick burst of aggression where you'll have this buff. Now, does it refresh? Grants Azir this for 5 seconds whenever he summons. Okay. So it's whenever he brings it out. So, in other words, like when one of them falls off at 10 seconds, you're not going to get a full 5 seconds after the third one falls off. It's only once you get the third one out there. The grammar's a little off on this, but I believe it's whenever you summon the third one. They really need to get me on the grammar team for writing these spells. We had a lively, not really debate, but like talk about the grammar on Zeke's Convergence and why that item sounds so confusing the other night on stream. So yeah, obviously this is just huge. I mean, he's going to have like 120% bonus attack speed off of the normal passive that he gets off of this, and then it's doubled here. So that's just like an astronomical amount of damage. So yeah, that's a massive, massive buff. And that's really going to make him shine as like this kind of huge burst mage where he has these like big windows of power. Whenever you go in and you do your, you know, ultimate to knock people back, and you already have 2 sand soldiers and you pop that third one, it's just like, bam, you just slam everybody in a fight. So I think that's going to be a massive buff, once again, for really good Azir players that are planning around when to drop that third soldier. And you have to prep and set up for that a little bit early. I mean, I guess you could just summon 1 and wait on that 1 to restock, and then drop 2, and then do it, so they're not suspecting the third one as much. Another way you could proc it is they are changing his E to where now if he runs into somebody, he gets a free soldier. So in theory, you could have 4 soldiers out at a time. Or, you know, you could have, you know, 1 out. Like you could have 1 out, do this, run into somebody, get that shield, drop a third one, boom, proc it. You still have 1 stored up at that point. So if you have 2 stocked, drop 1, go in, hit him with the sands, get a second one. I guess you could drop a third one almost immediately, and then you wouldn't have to wait 6 seconds. So you could have 2 stored up, drop 2, hit him with the E, and then immediately have those 3 to go for it. Or you could wait for another one to restock on the 6. So you drop 1, wait for another restock, and then you're going to have 2 in stock, hit him with the E, drop 1 of your stocked ones, then you're going to get the 5-second buff, and then right when it's about to wear off, or after it does wear off, drop it again, you get another 5-second buff. So you could have up to 10 seconds of mega attack speed if you hit somebody with your E, or you can drop it immediately if you have 2 stocked and you don't have to wait 6 seconds to get it out there. So lots of interesting strategic implications. I think this is really cool. And the sheer duration is lowered for 4 seconds, but it has a 0.7 AP ratio, so it's going to be a pretty big shield, because right now it's okay. Does decent damage, but it doesn't have a ratio on the shield. So now with that 0.7, you know, if you have 200 AP later, that's getting up to like a 380 shield, which is pretty good. So it gives you the it gives you that extra soldier, and it gives you a bigger shield. Did it not give you the shield immediately before? Gains a shield for 4 seconds. Okay. I don't know, but it only lasts for half a second, so it's really like you go in there, you start a fight with them. If they try to hit you within 1.5 seconds, then it's not really going to do any damage to you because you're going to have this huge shield. So that's really like encouraging that first scenario where I talked about where you drop one soldier, run into him with the E, drop your second soldier, and then just boom, go at him for 5 seconds with this huge burst of damage. So that's pretty interesting. It's encouraging you to be aggressive with your E, to get in there and just really make an impact. So you do have it as an escape, but now there's a much better reason to go in and be aggressive. So they used to like knock people up, I think, for like a second or a second and it wasn't a second and a half, but it used to knock people up kind of like a Jarvan flag and drag combo when he would go in and hit people with his E. So it doesn't knock people up anymore. So it doesn't give you the crowd control, but it does give you an extra massive damage spike because it gives you that soldier, which is key to getting 3 soldiers in a really quick way on the field to get that extra bonus attack speed. So yeah, I think it's going to be pretty big. And then lower cooldown on the ult. Everybody likes lower cooldowns on ult. That's great. Wider walls. This is going to make it much easier to block off choke points. So to block off like ramps to bases or, you know, different tight spots in the jungle or jungle ramps. So that's really nice. Now it doesn't stop people from dashing over walls now. So once it's landed, it's just immobile terrain. So they can jump over it with Tristana or Kha'Zix or whatever. So that's a decent change. So it's lower cooldown, so you can do more with it. You can fight more often with it, which once again helps you out in your early games. And now once you're 6, 20 second less on the cooldown means you can be much more aggressive trying to make those awesome Azir plays. So I think that's pretty huge. And that's a good way to balance it out, is kind of in the late game. It doesn't completely shut out mobility if it's around choke points. But it does, if they don't have the mobility, it does shut out more people. It has a larger width to hit more people for damage in a team fight. And it has a lower cooldown, so that's fair. Yeah, so all of this together, you notice the theme is give him a lot more power early, take away some of his range, and give him a lot more top-end scaling with this new, like, 3-soldier ability. They did lower some AP ratios, so there's a little bit less scaling on the Q, you know, in exchange for early game damage, a little bit less scaling on the W in exchange for better early game. That's fine. He has an excess amount of power late game. He does so much damage, especially with this extra 60% attack speed buff. I think that's fine. So that's going to give him a much smoother power curve. So now once he gets that Nashor's Tooth and he gets to level 6, he can drop 3 soldiers and actually go to town on some people. So I think it's really good. I mean, I think it's going to make him top 5 competitive. I mean, it might even make him, dare I say, the best in competitive, depending on how they nerf other people. I mean, he's good, and if tanks are still really viable, that's a big part of it. Is they are starting to nerf tanks a lot more, and he's very, very good against tanks. He wants to fight tanks, so he has a harder time against assassins. So if they like knock tanks out of the meta too much, and then that's like right when he comes to power, then he might have a bit more of a problem if everybody's playing things like Kassadin or LeBlanc. So I don't know. I think he'll definitely be a force in competitive and for Azir specialist in solo queue. Like my boy Jason out there, I'm looking at you. My good friend in real life who really enjoys it. Who really enjoys Azir. Then you're going to love this. This is going to be really good. This video is going to be long. Dang it. I wanted it to be just like 15 minutes, but I want to give you the depth. I don't just want to be like the OMG, OP, you know, type of thing. I want to explain why I think it's going to be good. And then that way you can kind of make decisions for yourself as to how it'll fit into the meta or what you might think about doing with him. Okay, brand, not going to matter. They're trying to make him more viable. Obviously, you're not going to be hitting a lot of CS in lane as brand, or you shouldn't be as a support brand. So that's not going to matter too much. You don't even really clear waves with your W. Typically, you'll hit the wave with your W, and then you actually clear with your E, because that spreads the fire to everything. So I don't think it matters. I mean, maybe in some cases in mid lane, obviously it's good. It's better than getting nothing. But like Brand's problem is he's very skill shot dependent in mid lane. He doesn't have escapes. He's super easy to gank and kill. He has very limited crowd control, and he has very low AP scaling because he has high base damages but low scaling. So that makes him pretty good early in early game team fights, particularly with his ult. But he just doesn't have very good all in. It's just it requires too much setup for a lot of mid laners. He just has too many counter matchups that would crush in mid lane, so I don't think it's going to matter. Caitlyn's a pretty big deal. I think this is going to propel Caitlyn back up to top 3. Might even make her number 1. I mean, she has a very good matchup against Tristan lane. That's the thing, and she... Like, this is why you didn't see Tristana very much until after the Caitlyn nerfs, and then after, like, 2 or 3, like, subsequent Caitlyn nerfs, that's why Trist all of a sudden became the number 180 carry. It wasn't because Trist got all these huge buffs, it's because her main competitor, Caitlyn, got squeezed out. So if Caitlyn comes back in, then Trist might be in trouble. We'll see. I think Trist will still be really good. But I think, you know, after this, if these changes go through, I think it's going to be... Trist, Caitlyn, Xayah, probably. Caitlyn has a pretty good matchup against Xayah also. Caitlyn has a good matchup against almost everybody, which is why she was nerfed. But anyway, so what they're doing with her is they're lowering her base health by quite a lot, by about 50. So this is going to make her very susceptible to early game all-ins. So, you know, if you get caught out by Zyra or Brand or Leona or just some really hard engage or hard burst damage champion early, then that could be a problem. However, you know, Caitlyn has such a massive range and such great defense with her net and her traps that really shouldn't happen that much. And those types of champions aren't really super popular in the meta right now anyways. So... fair, I'll take it. Yeah, if I'm a Caitlyn player and you're going to lower my HP to give me all my attack speed back, yes, please, I'll take that. Then that's exactly what they're doing. So they're increasing her base from 0.54 up to 0.56, which is massive. That was one of the defining nerfs that sort of pushed her out of the meta.
They're nerfing Caitlyn.
They're nerfing Caitlyn. Come here.
What the hell?
What do you think of that?
Wait, she's got my necklace.
She's grabby. No, they're buffing Caitlyn.
They're buffing her. I
They're
thought you said
making
they
her
were
buff.
nerfing her.
Well, they did nerf her.
She's been trying to kick off
buffing.
this legging.
Now they're buffing her.
Oh.
You like that?
What do you think about that?
You better be a Caitlyn one-trick all the way to Challenger level 3. Her first word's gonna be Challenger.
Challenger!
Challenger!
Did you go on your mandate today?
I did not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's...
Here.
Okay.
Use that. So go somewhere that takes
Why do you have to give me money and gift cards? Get out of here.
I've had that in my purse for like 2 years. So you gotta go to an AMC theater.
That's how often we go to the theater. We've had a gift card for 2 years to the theater that we got like 2 Christmases ago. When I say we don't really spend money and we live on a budget, that is probably an understatement.
Yes.
We don't even spend money when it's free money, when it's a gift card.
That's
we,
true.
We don't even spend it.
I have like 6 restaurant gift cards in my purse too.
Yeah, we've got...
that we need to spend.
Yeah, yes. We don't do things. Okay, so yeah, they're giving her this extra attack speed here, which is huge. And then 2% per level, you know, like mid-game, that's 20% extra when you get to like level 10. You know, it's like a dagger and a third, so that's like a free 500 gold in your pocket or so. 450, 500 gold, which is really good. And then they're giving her the base back, which remember that attack speed scales off of base, so the higher the base is, the more attack speed's going to matter. So I'm not going to do all that math for you right now, but just trust me, this is really, really big. And this is strange, because this is some more under-the-hood stuff that I don't entirely understand exactly how this works out mathematically on some of these things, but they're tinkering with a lot of under-the-hood stuff, with like Azir's like attack cast time thing getting lowered, and now this one. If this is what I think it is, which means there's a mandatory 0.15 delay before she attacks, and they're taking that to 0.1, that means she gets off 1/3 more attacks. Right? I mean, I guess maybe the best way to think of this is just to think of this as an even lower base attack speed that doesn't get modified by plus by attack speed bonuses. Either way, it's 1/3 less, which means she's going to attack 1/3 faster, I believe. The animation, at the very least, is going to be 1/3 faster. So it's not quite the same as like 30% extra attack speed or something like that. But it's a really big buff. Her regen's lowered. Whatever, it doesn't matter. So yeah, nice buffs to her attacking. Make her attack a lot faster, scale a lot harder. Excellent. Okay, Piltover Peacemaker. This is massive. This is one of the huge things, and I think I had it underlined, right? This is huge. This was the thing that pushed her out. If you're wondering what really pushed Caitlyn out of the meta, why'd she just completely fall off a cliff, this is why. Because she lost her wave clear. Because the Q only did 33% less damage. Damage beyond the first changed from 50% less to 33% less. Okay, so that's massive. So now when she casts her Q down a minion live, it actually will do a lot of damage to all the minions. Or when she hits a player, like through a minion line with her Q, it's actually going to hit them a lot harder. So this is a really, really big deal that they reverted this. So that's a huge buff for her. And now we talk about the traps here. This has been the defining thing that made Caitlyn super, super strong for a long time, are these... Oh, another change they just added, which is massive, is Headshot now affects turrets.
Headshot noob.
That's right. Headshot noob. And now, you know, they were going to change it to where you needed 8 stacks of Headshot. Let's see if the cat was there. I thought I heard her skittering around. Where you needed 8 stacks to get Headshot, and they reverted that. So now it's back to 6 stacks. You can Headshot turrets, which means, you know, obviously a lot of massive spike damage to turrets, especially if you get Rapid Fire Cannon, which has always been good on her. Moving and attacking generates these stacks. This is applicable to structures, okay? So that means that this can hit structures, which means you're going to get 800 range, which means you can attack I think a tower range is about 800. So that means you get this extra damage. Now you can't critically strike turrets, but it will apply this bonus damage, and it will apply headshot. So you can headshot turrets from a really long range away and proc this bonus magic damage. So that's really huge. That's going to solidify her as the premier sieger. Let me close the... I don't know what she's doing in there. She's torturing our child. So that's huge. So that reinforces Caitlyn as just the premier sieger. And then they are changing her Snap Trap around. So they're buffing Snap Trap quite a lot, which is very dangerous. Like, I thought they should have nerfed this. This is how I would have nerfed her originally. Like, don't mess with her attack speed. Don't mess with her wave clear. Just mess with these traps because they're ridiculous. But now they're actually buffing the traps. So headshot damage increased from maximum of 190 to 240. That's so much extra base trap damage. That's an insane amount of trap damage. You got to remember that when you hit someone with a headshot, that can crit also. And you get all these... Let me just show you on here. Like, what made Caitlyn ridiculously powerful and, like, headshot people for, like, 2,000 before. And she can still do that. That hasn't changed. Is these traps. So you get extra headshot damage of this amount, and it gets an extra AD ratio. So it applies this headshot math, which I've done in the past. I'm not going to do again here really quick. It applies this headshot ratio, which is a lot. It can crit. And this part can crit also because that's just adding to her attack. Because it's not on-hit damage. It deals... Her next basic attack deals bonus physical damage. It is not on-hit damage. It is an attack modifier. So that means that it can critically strike. On-hit damage like Trinity Force procs and things like that, Witchbane procs, those cannot crit because they are on-hit modifiers. This is an attack modifier, which means it can crit. And this modifies that attack modifier. So basically what all this means is you're going to have something with 240 base that's going to have its huge, it's still going to have really nice scaling, and it's going to have all these modifiers, and all of it can crit, and it can crit even bigger because of Infinity Edge. And it can rapid fire. The rapid fire cannot crit. However, static shiv can crit because this headshot can proc static shiv as well. Yeah, so she's gonna do even more burst damage than she does right now, which is huge. So yeah, that's gonna be a really big buff for her. Now they are changing the AD around from 60% of your total AD to up to 100% of your bonus AD, and the trap ground duration is lowered, so it's not always 90 seconds. That's fair, but it's still going to be out for an extremely long amount of time, so it's a minor nerf there. It doesn't matter. Recharge time lowered. Now this has to be a typo. There's no way, because it says it's lowered. So it starts at 30 and goes up to 50 recharge time? If it legit is going up to 50 recharge time, that's actually a pretty big nerf. And it says right now it goes down to 10. So if they're starting it at 30 and taking it up to 50, that is affected by cooldown reduction, which you don't get much cooldown reduction on her, but we'll see. I mean, that will make it... I assume that's a typo, but if that's not a typo, if it actually is legit going up to 50 seconds to recharge your traps, that's pretty big, because then you're going to have to choose when you want to drop them. But they do a lot more damage. I mean, here's the math on the extra damage. It basically does 43% extra damage. Because that 50 base matters so much more than whether it's base attack damage or bonus attack damage or whatever. So the old version would give you plus 93 damage, and then the new version would give you plus 136 damage. Off of a maxed out W at level 9. I think you will max traps outside of lane. You might get 1 or 2 points in Q, or like 2 or 3 rather points in Q in lane for wave clear, but then I think you'll max trap outside. Although, I don't know, like if it's increasing the recharge time that much, maybe you don't. Maybe you do max Q and then you max trap second. That's just a really weird way to do it. Like, to 50 seconds on a recharge is insane. I would just have the traps last, like, 10 seconds or something and just make the recharge rate lower. I don't know. We'll see. It's the PBE, once again, so they could change all this stuff. So, overall, it's a really big buff to Caitlyn. You know, another sort of unstated nerf here was Hurricane no longer procs. Each bolt of Hurricane no longer helps to charge headshots, so she doesn't get as many headshots, which does suck for her, but Rapid Fire Cannon's still really good on her, and it's even better now that you can headshot turrets from really far away with Rapid Fire. And Static Shiv is really good too, because that helps you out with your wave clear. So it's not like it's the end of the world because you can't get Hurricane anymore. Really, that Hurricane only procced when you were in range of 3 different targets also, which in team fights a lot of the time, you're just netting backward and hitting the tank that's in your face a lot of times too. So you're not even proccing all 3 bolts in a lot of fights. And they're nerfing Ardent Sensor anyways, where Ardent Sensor is not going to apply to all 3. Like, the healing is not going to apply to all 3 bolts, which is really overpowered, right? Because then you'd heal 75 per attack on a wave. Because Ardent Sensor would give you plus 25 on-hit healing. So anyways, the moral of the story is, I still think you can go Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire Cannon, Static Shiv, and still be very, very strong on Caitlyn, especially as a siege attacker now. So, depending on if that trap duration really is 50, that might knock her down, in my estimation, a little bit. Like, so an increase in where she is, but maybe not top 3. I don't think they're going to make it 50 seconds recharge on the traps. Because usually you would want, like, that's just, it feels bad, you know, when you're leveling up traps to get longer duration on it, or like longer recharge time. It feels like they should start high and work their way lower. So I think that has to be a typo or something. I imagine it starts at 30 and goes down to 10. But anyways, I think she's going to be super good. Okay, Janna, this is probably why a lot of people are watching this video. They want to know what I think about the Janna nerfs. I don't think it's as bad as I initially thought. And there's a couple of reasons why. So first of all, she gets stronger auto attacks, which doesn't really matter in the mid game. You know, you're going to do like an extra 20 to 25 on hit damage. That's just really goofy. I don't know why. Like, they're trying to make Janna a more active champion. To where she doesn't just, like, in theory, just hang out in a bush and shield people and be really strong late game. So But I don't think that's a good way to do it. It's just irrelevant. Like, you're not going to go up and auto attack with Janna, especially if your shield has a much longer cooldown. So they're increasing her range to 550, so you will get some more auto attacks off in lane. I mean, maybe against Braum or like some other tanks, you might be able to hit him a couple of times, but I just don't think it's going to matter that much. Tailwind now applies to you, and it still is 8%. They had been toying with 5%, but it looks like they brought it back to 8%. So you get the Tailwind now. So that means that you're getting 8% extra move speed, like, at level 1, which is huge. So they are nerfing her W down from 17% total to 10%. So when you max out your W, it's going to equal out because you're going to get Tailwind. You're going to end up with 1% extra move speed. So it's not going to matter in the mid game, but early game, like, having that extra move speed's pretty big. I mean, 8% on her base of like 335 is going to be like 27 extra move speed or something. So it's like you get to start with the free brown boots now, which is pretty big. Now they are doing some significant buffs to her Q, I think. I'm not sure what this means. Always reaches its destination in 1.5 seconds. So I'm not sure if that's faster or slower. But they had, you know, it had been whenever you charged it up over time, I think it moved faster. I'm not really sure. I don't know what that means. That's just a really weird kind of under the hood, because I'm not sure just how long, like... So if you throw it, like, one unit in front of you, it's still going to take a second and a half to get there, like, super slow-mo. So does this mean you always have to throw it max distance so that it covers that whole distance in 1.5 seconds? Is that what it is? So even if you're aiming at someone right in front of you, you always want to throw it really far behind them so that it just moves faster? Is that what that means? It feels like that would be extremely weird. Or does it just always go its max distance regardless of where you throw it? Maybe that's what it is. It always goes its max distance regardless of whenever you throw it. I don't know. It's a bizarre change. So the bonus range per second charged is lowered. Nobody charges this up to max range. Not any like serious like ranked higher elo players. It's always instant cast, and it's always, almost always, to disrupt a fight as fast as you can, to stop a movement, or to stop someone from channeling something, or just to crowd control someone for that extra, you know, quarter of a second. But they are lowering the mana cost quite a lot, which is huge, because that spell is so expensive in lane. So if you're taking small trades in lane, you know, if you just want to get that extra little chip shot of damage in on their 80 carry or something like that, it's really not worth it to do it, because it costs so much mana and it has such a long cooldown that it's not worth it. Like, you have to save it for key moments. So lowering the cooldown is going to let you use it a lot more often, because 90 mana for a level 1 spell for a support is obscenely high. So lowering it to 60 is a lot more reasonable. And you're only going to have this level 1 for most of the game. You're going to level up your E first, and then your W second, and then Q. So that's going to keep this relatively cheap for a lot of the game, which is nice. Cooldown lowered to 12 at all ranks. Excellent change, because once again, you're not going to level it up. So yeah, it's a little bit higher than the max level, but who cares? It's lower than 14, which is what level 1 is. That's good. The base range increase. This is actually a really big deal. For any old school Janna players, it used to be this range, or maybe even a bit further. And that's going to allow you to disrupt stuff a lot further away and to knock people up a lot further away. I mean, the extra 150 is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like somewhere between 15 to 20% more range, probably like 17% more range, something like that. I mean, let me see. Yeah, 17.6% more range. So yeah, that's actually really big. That's a pretty big buff. That just gives you so much more flexibility in how you use this, and just increases your ability to disrupt fights. That's actually a really, really important quality of life changes for Howling Gale, so that's good. The W, I don't think is going to matter. It's 600 from the center to center to 550 edge to edge. From how they're describing this, it's not going to matter that much. I mean, maybe it's like an extra 25 range or something. Like 50 range sounds bad, but I feel like since it's not from center to center, then it's not going to be as big of a deal. So that I don't think the range is going to matter that much. Okay, so lower cooldowns. Once again, you can trade with it more in lane if you want to, which is good. Bonus movement speed lowered. That's fine because once again, they're giving you this for free on your passive. And then the slow duration from 3 to 2 seconds. I don't like that change, but I mean, it does have a lower cooldown. This means you don't have as much like kill potential on your ganks. Like if the jungler ganks for you early on. So it's okay, I guess. I mean, whatever, it's fine. Now this is the big controversial one. They're moving its cooldown up to 18 seconds at level 1. This is bad. I mean, this is bad. This is really bad for Janna. And obviously, like, because your shield is your bread and butter. Like, this is what you do for trades. You put this on your AD carry when you're trading. This is your defense against harassment. It's just everything. And because you have to have it up to stop harassment, you can't retroactively heal people like you can with Soraka or Sona. You have to have this up, and you have to pull the trigger quickly to stop damage. You have to do it retroactively. Or not retroactively. You have to do it, like, in response, right? Actively. To stop damage. So that means that 18 seconds is such a huge window for harassment. So if you use that, you know, at level 1 to stop, you know, some kind of harassment, then you're going to be vulnerable for a full 18 seconds, which is a pretty big deal. So against harassed champions like Sona, Lulu, Zyra, Karma, all these champions are going to be able to harass Janna at a lane pretty consistently now from levels 1 to 5. So anything that has great harassment early is going to be a pretty good pick at a Janna, which I guess will create more counterplay to her. However, this is not going to be as big of a deal against all-in champions like Thresh or Leona because they have such long cooldowns on their engages. It's usually like, you know, well over 10 seconds at early levels for their engage, or like Blitzcrank. You know, Blitz is going to have, you know, 20-second cooldown on his hook. Thresh is going to have something like that, especially if he doesn't hit a minion or something with his hook when he misses. So it's not going to change her matchup that much against all-in champions, I don't think. But it does change it a lot against like very steady harassment champions. Now this can be mitigated some because you can play further back and make sure you don't get hit by stuff. You can tell your AD carry to get a Doran shield and run like Warlords. Maybe they can heal through it early on, but against steady harassment, this is going to make her a lot weaker early. However, it does get back to 10 later on, so by the time you get to level 9, it'll be neutralized. 2 seconds is not a huge deal. You know, once you get to level 7, it'll matter. You'll definitely feel it, but... So she'll return to normalcy at level 9. So this just kind of solidifies that she's very weak early game, and this is going to make her even weaker in the laning phase. So you can't just passively farm it out as easily early game, because people will be able to harass you out. So it weakens her early, but she still has a strong late game. This Q is actually going to be much more useful later on in the game. You'll be able to disrupt more people. You'll have more opportunities for disruption in fights. So overall, it is a nerf, but it's not as bad as you think. It's just you need to be a bit more careful when you pick her, that you're not going to be up against early game harass. So I do think that this will make Sona definitely better than her in solo queue. I think Sona's going to be the queen after this for sure in solo queue. Because it's just going to crush her. Like, Sona's already a good matchup into her, but being able to lay down that much harassment early on with Sona, it's just going to be a really, really bad matchup for Janna now. And because Sona can match your team fighting later on as well, and the Ardent Sensor nerf is going to affect Janna a lot more than Sona, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But yeah, I think this is... pretty big. So Sona's going to be ahead of her. I think Rakan will be ahead of her. Lulu will probably be a pretty good matchup into her now because Lulu can kind of match her scaling late game also. And now you can actually stick your harassment. So I feel like, yeah, Sona, Rakan, and Lulu will all be better than Janna in solo queue. But I think that Janna will potentially, you know, be good later. Janna's still going to be very good against assassins later on. Lulu's good against assassins also. And her scaling and her tricks are going to be a little bit better. Like, she's going to have better play against certain matchups that very heavily depend on mobility. So, like, better play against, like, Lee Sin, much better play against Rammus than some other champions because of her Q. So she'll still be there. I still think she'll be top 5. But I think she'll definitely get leapfrogged by Sona and probably Rakan in priority, and maybe Lulu. Probably Lulu. So top 5, but definitely not number 1 anymore, and maybe not even in the top 3. But she's had a long reign as being number 1 on my channel at least. She's been number 1 for like 10 patches or something. So I think it's just fair to let other people, to pass the torch on, to let other people be at the very top of the mountain for now. She'll still be relevant. Okay. Doesn't matter. Malphite still has a ton of problems. That's not it. Like, his problem's not that his shield isn't strong enough early on, right? Like, for burst damage. His problem is that he's very heavily reliant on his ult, and when he doesn't have his ult, he's basically worthless in a fight. Like, they need to just buff up his other abilities. Just make him like a real debuffer. Like, I don't know, increase the radius on his E, like increase the like speed that he gets when he like Qs so that he can run onto the back line and just stick to people. They need to buff him, but this is the wrong way to do it. So it's not going to matter. He's still going to be a relatively low tier pick. He'll be a lot better in bronze and silver, but higher than that, it gets more dicey. Okay, this is a big nerf to Vayne. All right, I've heard some channels saying, oh my god, overpowered Vayne. You know, no, false. Falso. And the reason is, this right here is astronomically bad for her. Her Q no longer can critically strike. This is why Vayne was even relevant. Vayne like hasn't been relevant in solo queue, or had not been relevant for years until they changed this. I think it was last fall, and that made her very, very powerful in the winter before they nerfed her a little bit. But this is what brought her into the spotlight. I mean, look at the history here. When was that change? Okay, yeah, so they reduced the damage from 70% to 50% because she was so overpowered last winter. It was like basically Vayne Twitch was the meta, like in the early Season 7 preseason, and then they nerfed both of them quite a bit. People forget that. They think, oh, Season 7, LOL. I mean, 624 was the preseason, so that's basically Season 7. You were playing on, like, Season 7 ELO at that point. It was affecting your ELO for Season 7, so, in your ranking. Okay, so they increased it in 617, because she still wasn't as relevant. It was back in Season 5. Was it really that long ago? Or did I just miss it? Okay, so they increased silver bolts. They removed flat damage on it. No, it's not that far, right? No, I just must have missed it. Where was it? Go through walls, invisibility. When did... They made that change at some point. I'm just like, why am I... If one crits... Okay, so this means it can crit at this point. Bonus damage and Vayne's basic attack crit. Longer duration and 522 damage ratio. Cooldown starts when Vayne attacks upon hitting a target. Well, I can't remember. They added this in here. Is it just... It must just not be on the wiki for some reason. There's no way it was like from Season 4. It was relatively new. Yeah, they just haven't cataloged it in here. But basically, it looks like here they changed this, so it could crit at this point. But basically, just trust me, this is what made Vayne relevant, and I think they did it last season. Right, sometime in Season 6, they made it to where her tumble could crit. And that's what made her relevant in Season 6. Okay, they just, for some reason, they don't have it cataloged, but clearly it can crit here. All right, but that is so huge. So if you, did I do the math on it? I didn't quite do the math, but like basically what critical strike turns into is every 1% crit equals 1%. Every 1% chance to crit is 1% extra total damage, if you want to think of it as that. That's the easiest way to think about it. And if you have Infinity Edge adds an extra 25% to that. So if you have an 80% chance to crit, which you would if you go Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire Cannon, Stack Shiv, if you have an 80% chance to crit, and then Infinity Edge gives you that extra 0.25 or 0.5 modifier, you get that extra bonus damage, then that's really 120% extra damage, if you want to think of it that way. So if each percentage point to crit is equal to 1% damage, that's 80. And then you're getting an extra 50% damage times 1.5. That's 120% damage. So once she gets 80% to crit, that's basically giving her Q an extra 120% damage. And don't forget that the Q also has another modifier. So the Q adds 0.5 instead of 0.7 overall. So that's what makes this really strong, is let's say that you have, I don't know, 150 ability power, right? 150 ability power or attack damage. Then you times that extra 50% times 1.5. And then if you have that 80% crit, that build I just talked about, Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire Cannon, Stack Shiv, then that's going to be times an additional 120% damage. So times... means you're going to be doing like somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 damage on average when you attack if you have 150 AD with that build, which is obviously massive, and that doesn't include Static Shiv also being able to crit off of Tumble. So that's much, much more. Like, they're increasing the damage on this to like 50% of your total AD. Who cares? Right? So if you have that same setup, so this deals roughly 500 damage. You have that same setup with the 150 times 1.7. You're doing 255 damage now. So that's a difference of like 150 damage per auto attack because crit no longer applies to it. That's how big the difference is. It's like, I mean, what is that number? It's a what was it? It's 495. I mean, you're losing like 50% of your damage. Somewhere close to 50% of your damage on your Qs. 50% of your damage on Qs at 3 items. That's obviously really, really awful. Now, you know, you might argue, well, okay, but it has 20% more AD ratio, so what if you get a lot more AD instead of getting critical strike? Well, the problem with that theory is that there just are not a lot of good, like, big-time AD items right now, especially because Vayne wants attack speed, okay? Because that's a big part of her identity is her attack speed, so she procs more of these true bolts. So she wants attack speed, but now she really wants AD because she can't crit on this anymore, and she has a higher AD ratio on it. So she wants AD and attack speed, but there aren't a lot of items that give you AD plus attack speed. So yeah, you could go something like an early Infinity Edge into Bloodthirster or something on her, and you get some pretty big tumble procs, but you wouldn't have the attack speed to really take advantage of Silver Bolts. So the only thing that really gives like AD plus attack speed is Blade of the Ruined King, which is probably what she'll have to start building again. Because right now, like, the goofy thing with the balancing, if this goes through, is you actually do far, far more damage with the Energizer build if you just sit there and auto attack rather than tumble. So anytime you tumble, you're actually losing damage because you have to actually make the motion to tumble, first of all. So you're losing like an auto attack or two there, but then also the tumble damage itself is no longer going to do as much damage as just a normal attack would do. So that's awkward. So yeah, that's a big deal. And like her other option that she could build, you know, would be something like, you're probably going to see her build like Ginsu's plus Blade of the Ruined King or something like that. Now, some Vaynes have been building this. This is really goofy because it has ability power on it, and that's so awkward because Vayne has no ability power anywhere in her kit. Like, 0. So that ability power is a completely wasted stat. So you have to take that out of the equation when you're considering whether or not Ginsu's good. So at 6 stacks, you take off 522 value. Wait, that's not right. Okay, so you take the base off, which is 625. So you're losing 1,000 gold worth of value just at the start. So it costs 3,600, and it doesn't reach its gold value. It's only 3,300 gold worth of stuff. So now you're paying 3,600 for a 2,300 gold item on your first attack, right? So before you get it stacked. And you don't have a lot of quick ways to stack it. Like, you don't have Hurricane, you don't have lots of multi-hits. You have to do it the old-fashioned way, where you actually just attack people, 6 times to get it stacked up. Which means you're not going to have as much, like, just boom, pop, right when you start the fight. So someone like a Caitlyn, who starts off with, they get to hit you with their, they have a huge chance to crit, 80%. And they're going to have potentially a headshot, potentially a static shiv proc, potentially a rapid fire cannon proc. They're going to have all this stuff. So they're just going to, just one-shot you basically for 1,700 damage while you're trying to, roll around and get this thing stacked up. Because you're losing all of that ability power. You do get the attack speed, and you do get the attack damage stacked up, which is nice. That gets you up to 53 attack damage and 73 attack speed, which is good. And you get to proc more silver bolts because you're attacking more often, right? And you're going to get to proc more Blade of the Ruined King procs if you get Blade of the Ruined King. But that's still just not going to work against crit strike users because it's going to take way too long to power this up. I mean, maybe if you're sitting there just trying to crack through a Malachi or something, this might be an okay build, but I think there will be Veins that will try that. They're going to try to rush Blade of the Ruined King into Ginsu's or something, or just maybe Blade into Phantom Dancer, old school builds. But it's just going to be a lot weaker. Because right now, what makes her so strong is she can roll out of a bush and like I just showed, on average deal 500 damage to you with her first attack. So that's gonna suck. And then her, they're doing some tweaks to her silver bolts. It's not gonna matter. A little bit less damage early, a little bit more the same damage later. The minimum damage is increased marginally later. It's not gonna matter that much. The final hour, now this is the one where everyone's like, oh my god, it's overpowered. So you get an extra 4 seconds whenever you get a kill or an assist on a champion, basically. So it starts off, if you look at final hour, you do get the bonus attack damage, which is nice. You get extra on-hit damage. So you could get the duration up to, it can't go more than its original of 12 seconds. So if you killed 4 people in a fight, you could get this up to 28 seconds or something like that. So in a really, really long fight against a team completely full of tanks, when you have Ginsu's Rage Blade fully stacked, and you have Blade of the Ruined King going on with all those procs, and you're getting resets off of final hours and just rolling around everywhere to reposition. Yeah, that's going to be good. But that's not the meta that we live in. We live in a very fast-paced meta for the most part, especially now that they're nerfing tanks even more. And she's just going to get blown up by a long-range Caitlyn or Tristana or Xayah after Xayah puts all those feathers on the ground and just presses E, just blows up an entire team. She's just too slow with this build. Her power spike's going to be too late. I think this is a huge nerf to Vayne. Vayne's already relatively weak compared to other champions, but her one saving grace is once she gets that Infinity Edge plus Static Shiv, she can just roll out, press her ult, tumble out, and then just crit somebody with her Q for 1,500 damage or something. So she's a short-ranged Caitlyn, kind of thing, where it just has this huge interaction with crit, like a Caitlyn headshot, and they're taking that away. So I think it's a massive, massive nerf. I don't think we're going to see Vayne out of any serious play after these changes. They're trying to clarify her identity as longer range, or longer fight damage, but I think if they really want to do that, they need to give her some life steal. It would make sense. She's a vampire hunter. Have her turn into a vampire or something. When she does final hour, I think they were tinkering with something like this on the public beta in like a couple of patches ago, where she killed somebody, then she healed for a certain percentage of her max health, like maybe 30% of her max health or something. That would be interesting. I would like to see that, because that would clarify her as this long-term endurance fighter, where if the team fight goes for a long time, then she's going to win because she gets all this lifesteal. I would like to see like just some on-hit healing. It's like some on-hit damage, on-hit healing when she procs her ult. Something like that. Like something like a little mini Blade the Ruined King or something on her ult. It's something that synergizes better with... Like the resets are nice, but I feel like if you're going to do that, just make her ult more powerful. More meaningful, that it stays up. Like, oh my god, if this is up, she's going to start crushing people. Even if you have to lower the duration, like maybe you could make the duration like 6 seconds or something, and then just like buff it up like crazy. Like have it give extra attack speed, extra like, you know, on-hit damage or on-hit healing. Or maybe it slows attackers, or just something, just like an over-the-top, like super powerful ult that doesn't one-shot people, but if it stays up, she's not going to lose the fight. So I think a lot of extra lifesteal. Maybe it gives her like 30% lifesteal or something like that for the duration. Just something crazy like that. And I think that might make her more viable. But for right now, I don't think that's... It's just going to suck. It's going to be bad. How are we looking on duration? It's long, as usual. Veigar, cute change, irrelevant. He still has a lot of problems mid lane. This isn't going to solve any of them. He already does enough damage. He's not about, like, sustained landing lots of Qs. It's not really what he's all about.
They need to see her damage.
I think they've seen enough of her here.
Okay.
Yeah. I think 1 appearance per video is probably fine.
Okay.
My daughter just really likes showing off. Or my wife likes showing off her daughter. Is that right, Rory? Yeah, she's smiling, but yeah, she probably needs to go to sleep.
Is?
Yeah, she was smiling there.
Well, she didn't smile for me earlier.
Well, she smiles for Daddy because she knows better. Isn't that right, Rory?
Yeah, she knows I'm going to feed her.
Yeah, she knows better.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
you better smile, girl. Smile for the camera. But anyway, so Zen buffs. I don't think, I mean, he's better than he was, but he's got like Aatrox Nasus problems, right? Where he can't stick to people. This doesn't fix that. Like, he can get in and do a lot of damage. So I think he'll be great in like bronze and silver, maybe gold, but I don't know. I mean, they are nerfing Janna a lot, and Janna's a huge like counter to champions like Zen and Nasus and Aatrox. But I don't know. He does get extra bonus damage on every third attack, and he gets extra, a lot of extra healing. So, you know, the Ginsu's and the Blade the Ruined King would probably be a pretty good build for him. Potentially. I mean, he's okay. Like I feel like he's basically the same. I mean, he does have this Rengar thrust, which would give him, I believe, a lot of potentially like good area of effect damage in a team fight. So if you had Jarvan like trap 3 people and then he jumps in and hits everybody with his slash and thrust, I think that's a ton of damage. So I think he might be like Rengar-esque, except without the ability to sneak up on people. So he just like bursts in and does this little sweep, like full combo, and just kills people. But the question is that enough, right? Like, is it enough that he can just jump in and blow people up when he has no escapes? I mean, if people can't kite him and he gets to sit there and keep auto-attacking, especially with this ability to make him completely immune to ranged attacks for 3 seconds, could give him some more sticking power. I mean, he might be able to melt through tanks with this if he has enough burst, if they keep nerfing tanks enough. So he might show his way into the meta. I mean, we'll see what the final numbers are. I just feel like he still has kind of Nasus-itis here, where he can go in and blow up a squishy champion, sure, if they don't get any help, if they don't have any escapes. But I still think there will be too many potential opportunities to outplay him. So we'll see. Like, they need to give him something where, like, if he gets a kill or an assist, it resets his charge so that he can charge onto somebody else, kind of like an Akali type of thing, where he can just keep charging when he gets kills and assists. I think that would help him out. I mean, that right there would make him viable for sure. But right now, I don't know. He's okay. I think he'll be a really good jungle duelist. So if you catch somebody out in the jungle, you can invade and fight him and probably kill him early. Okay, Ardent sensor changes. They've changed this around quite a lot. It says this 20 to 40%, but just today they released something that said they reverted that, so it's always 25% again. Basically, they're taking off the plus healing from it, which is gonna be a little bit rough in the mid game for champions that don't have any kind of innate healing, and if they don't have a support that gives them healing. So once again, this is not going to matter that much for Sona, because Sona's probably going to keep people topped off, but it will matter for champions like Lulu, who doesn't have an innate heal, and Janna, who doesn't have a heal. But it's not going to matter as much for like Sona and Soraka as far as Ardent Sensor goes. I think that's fair. I mean, I think Sensor obviously needs to be nerfed, and that's what I've been saying to do for several patches now, is take off the plus healing and shielding. However, they are also like adding on, it gives the bonus to you, which I'm not sure like why they're doing that. That's such a weird buff. That's like encouraging mid laners to get this, potentially. Someone like Azir who would really benefit from the extra attack speed. I don't think Azir will get it, by the way, but you know, it's just opening the door for some really weird abuse by some corner case that I haven't thought of yet. So I haven't spent forever thinking about this. But I don't know, it just seems like a bizarre change where there's going to be something like maybe Kale. I mean, the things that I think could abuse this a lot would be like Kale or maybe Misfortune support. So Misfortune support can use Stoneborn Pact plus her E to slow people to apply the Stoneborn debuff, which would apply Ardent Sensor. And now she would, if someone else hits them, then she would get that extra attack speed and on-hit damage. So it seems like it'd be best for Misfortune support. I don't think Misfortune support will be great because of this, but it certainly opens the door to help her out. Maybe they're trying to balance it out so that champions who don't benefit from plus healing and shielding as much will get some benefit out of getting this item. Kale's another one who really likes attack speed and wouldn't mind on-hit damage. I don't think this is going to bring Kale into the spotlight as support, but so I'm sure there will be some corner cases that can abuse that potentially. It's just really, why would you open yourself up to that? It just feels like that's going to be really hard to balance if they do that shift. So it removes 600 gold of value from the buff, which is fine because it's around like 2,000 gold per value in the buff. So I think that's fine. It's still going to be like 1,200, somewhere between 1,200 and 1,300 gold per person. So if you're, affecting 2 or 3 people with this, you're still going to get a tremendous value because it's almost worth it by itself. I mean, I would like to see them knock off like 10 AP or just like take off the plus healing and shielding or take off the move speed. Just really hit it even more than they already hit it. Because I think it's still going to be the de facto like best item. Because it's already like, even if you don't include the passive, it's still worth almost 2,500 gold for 2,300 gold value. So it's already super cost efficient. If they knocked off 10 ability power, that would take away 200 gold worth of efficiency and bring it to about 2,300 gold total. So that would make it a little more reasonable on the base end. And then the 25 on hits worth 625. The 25 attack is worth that. It doesn't have a value for the on hit healing because I don't think there are many other items in the game that give that. So I just assumed it was worth about as much as the on hit damage, when in fact it's probably a little bit more valuable. But either way, it's taken off about 625 gold. As I said before, about 600, 625. But it's still going to have, according to this calculation, 1,250 gold value per person. So if you're, affecting 2 people, that's 2,500 gold value, in addition to its already 2,500 gold value. So it's going to give you like 5,000 gold worth of stats for your team, as long as you affect 2 people, which a lot of the champions that can affect 1 person will affect 2 people. So even if it just affects 1 person, like it's still gonna be almost a 4,000 gold value for 2,300 gold in just like the very basic scenario, which is obscene. I mean, that's 162% efficient if a single ally is buffed. That's not including the on hit. And keep in mind, this is very, very reliable. So whereas something like Redemption offers a huge bargain if people get hit by Redemption, especially later in the game, especially if you have a bunch of other plus healing and shielding items. It's still going to be like a lot more reliable because they can't mess it up. No one can dodge this. No one can run out of this redemption, right? You just press shield on them and it works. And that's what makes it really strong, is it's reliable. You can't mess it up. Your allies can't mess it up. It just happens. So I think it's still going to be the de facto really strong item. So I don't think this is going to matter in terms of priority. Like, it will make enchanters a little bit weaker to poke in the mid game. So like Zyra, Brand, Jungle Ezreal, Talia, because they're not going to have as much plus healing. The champions that they're buffing. So like the AD carries aren't just going to be able to sit there and you can't shield them and just have them just kill a minion wave to heal from like 50% to full because they got poked by Ezreal, right? So this will matter. It's going to make enchanters a little weaker, but I don't think it's going to matter that much. I still think that the meta is still going to be very heavy enchanter based. I think that this increases Sona's value a lot because she already has a base heal that she uses to apply this. So I don't think that's going to matter too much. I don't think Soraka's going to care too much about this either because she uses a heal to proc it. But I do think it'll be particularly rough on Janna because Janna is already receiving other nerfs. And I think it'll be a little rough on Lulu because Lulu doesn't have another heal in her kit. Unless you get Ardent Sensor. Or Athene's Unholy Grail. So, we'll see. I mean, you can work around it. You can get your AD carry to build Door and Shield. Or they can get, I don't know, some kind of lifesteal in their kit somewhere. Or just, like, change their playstyle around a bit. Like, you can work around it. But it's going to hurt a little bit. The Bramble Vest changes are pretty big. They just changed this also today, which isn't reflected on this on the collective page yet. But they are lowering the armor back down to 35. And they're lowering the on-hit damage that it reflects to 15 from 20. So this is really massive. I think this one might actually be the meta changer. If they go through with this. So it's going to be... Because the problem with Bramble Vest right now is it's 900 gold, and it reflects back a lot of damage, a lot of magic damage per hit. Especially in the early game if someone rushes this. So if someone rushes this against like a Gnar, a Riven, a Fiora, if they go up and auto attack, I mean Fiora might, and it gives armor. So Fiora might auto attack somebody for, I don't know, 50 damage after armor is calculated, but then this is reflecting 20 back at her. And so that's the problem. And a lot of these tanks, especially someone like Malachi top lane, is going to heal back a lot of your, you know, the damage that you're dishing out with this. So it just makes trading really, really hard because they're trading back for free just as a passive on this. They're trading back, you know, at least 20 or 30% of the damage that you're dealing in the early game. And so lowering this from 20 to 35 is going to cut the amount of damage reflected by 25%, which is huge. It's also 33% more in cost that you're not getting any compensation for. So that's pretty massive as well. So I think Fiora is going to be the #1 top laner after this, because the only reason that people are a little afraid to play Fiora is because of this Bramble Vest early game. They just like gave her back all of her nerfs. They just reverted almost all of them that they've done this season because Bramble Vest was holding her down. And now they're nerfing Bramble Vest, and I don't see any nerfs for her yet. And it would look kind of silly if they just nerfed her back after they just buffed her back from nerfing her previously. So that would be about as silly as it sounds. So I think they'll keep the buffs on her, and I think she'll, if she's not #1, maybe not #1, will definitely be a top 3 pro pick after this. So I think Gnar is going to benefit very heavily from this. Gnar kind of heals himself up with his Mega Gnar over time, so he doesn't care about Bramble Vest as much, but it does matter. So Gnar, Jace will benefit hugely from this because he doesn't have a lot of heal in his kit early on, so he's not going to be taking as much reflected damage, and he's very auto attack, harassment reliant in lane, so I think that's huge. And then someone like Kled, I think, will be pretty big off of this too. Riven will be pretty big. So I think this is going to open up to bring the fighters back. I think this might push tanks out of top lane. We'll see. That might be a bit extreme of a prediction, but I think it might push the tanks out and put the fighters in, which means there's going to be a greater like necessity for tanks in the jungle and maybe tanks as support, although I think that tank support are still going to be pretty weak until they change the itemization around a little bit more than they are. But this might push most tanks out of top lane, with the exception of maybe like Jarvan, maybe Maokai. Like the best of the best might still be up there, but a lot of tanks are going to have a rough time after that change. All right, Righteous Glory, minor nerf, 6% more cost. I don't think it's going to be that big by itself, but keep in mind they've also changed Bramble Vest, they changed Gargoyle, Stoneplate, they changed Cinderhulk, and they changed Knight's Vow. So they changed like every item that tanks want to get. They nerfed all of them. So all of these together, in addition to buffs to champions like Fiora, are going to be problematic. Enchanters, especially Janna, are taking a bit of a hit off the Ardent Sensor nerf. And enchanters are very good with tanks, so I think tanks will still be the best in the jungle. I think tanks like Sejuani, Maokai, Jarvan, they'll probably still be the best. But I mean, this Zen change might really be able to punish them early. Ezreal can punish them early. Some of these new Nidalee builds could potentially punish early. So I don't know. We'll see. I'll have to see what the final product is, but this might hurt tanks. I mean, obviously it hurts them, but it might hurt them quite a bit. So we'll see. I still think tanks in the jungle will be the way to go, but I think we might shift to more fighters in the top. Okay, Zeke's, it's a buff. It's helpful, but it's still overall a pretty weak item. They're just better options. I mean, Lock-in and Vow, Knight's Vow are still just a lot more reliable and just stronger, but Zeke's is a pretty decent pick. Okay, that's going to be it for this video. I wanted to be short. It's not. There's a lot of information there. So once again, these are not finalized changes. These are things that are proposed for the PBE. And once the actual patch comes out next week, then I'll do a much more in-depth analysis. But people are always just clamoring, what do I think of these new changes? What do I think of the PBE? So I just wanted to go ahead and get something out there for you. So that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.